Welcome back, everybody, to Disc Media, a startup story, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up. And we've been chronicling our journey through this podcast of starting Disc Media. And one of the things that we got into very early on was podcasting, chronicling our journey. And as we say in our intro, we're either going to crash and burn or we're going to make something of it. You get a front row seat to seeing it all. And so far, we're still here, so that's a good thing. But I'm always anxious to learn from people who have been in this podcasting space for a while. And I've been doing it, we'll say, as an amateur, maybe a prosumer, if you will, for a number of years. And there's so much that can be done in this media, in this platform. And there's so many things that you can do to grow your business or just grow your brand, grow your own reach and your contacts. And I think that's one of the things that really excites me the most about this platform and what it does. And today we have a podcast veteran, somebody who's been doing this for a little bit now, has some good notoriety behind their names, founded Twin Flame Studio, produce not only audio podcasts, but also audiobooks, and is really into this audio space altogether. Welcome, if you will, CEO and founder of Twin Flame Studio, Tina Dietz. Tina, how are you?
It's great, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining and being willing to share some of your wisdom and your insight about this podcast medium. I mean, you've racked up some accolades and some awards along the way in this space.
As one does. Yeah. It's like most folks in the podcasting space, audio space, I do love the sound of my own voice. Not afraid to admit it. So happy to be here to share whatever I can.
Yeah, it is funny. You do have to get used to hearing yourself if you're going to get in this space, especially when you're starting out and you're doing all your own editing and you're just trying to find the best way to come across. And I can't tell you how many times I listen to myself and I go, oh man, I hate that. I hate that I have that habit. I need to break that habit in the next episode.
Most people hate the sound of their own voice, and we have all these little vocal tics and things like that. If you really want to be horrified, listen back to all of the voicemails that you've ever left for somebody, and you're like, I am a robot. Like I leave the same message over and over again. It's just a human thing. It's funny.
Well, years ago, when I started my professional career, one of the things that I did was I worked in telephone customer service.
Oh, Lord.
So I got really good at talking to strangers on the phone, an art that is lost by our younger generation, I think, because, they will usually text and very rarely actually use the phone for what its purpose is. But yeah, I got really used to just talking to people and just striking up a conversation. And I've always kind of been an audio aficionado anyway, so it all kind of fit. But you have a really robust background. Really, you've done a lot in this space. If you wouldn't mind, can you walk us through a little bit of how you got started on this path and some of the things that you've done?
It's a weird journey. It's never a straight line, but when you look back on it, hindsight is 20/20, right? And so looking back on it now, it's like, oh, well, this feels a little bit inevitable that I might have ended up in this place, producing audiobooks, the background in podcasting, and now producing books from podcast content. I was a business coach for many years, and before that I was a therapist. And the audio really came into my life because I found myself promoting my business early on through podcast interviews. And at the time, it was more online radio. It was, I can't even remember some of the names of the outlets and things like that. And we also did teleclasses and we did, telesummits and things like that, because the video technology hadn't caught up, but the audio technology was very enduring. I mean, think about it, radio is hundreds of years old. The first audiobook was produced in, I think, 1930. So audio has been such an enduring format. We had it earlier in the internet than we had video. And so I was doing a lot of those kinds of interviews. And many times I kept getting asked, why don't you have your own show? Why don't you have your own show? So in 2014, I decided to produce my own podcast and worked with a wonderful company that's still around called Cashflow Podcasting. And the owner, Ben, and I became friends and colleagues. And I was just so smitten with the format that I ended up in business with Ben, basically podcast coaching, because I had already been a business coach. And so I understood the strategy and connecting the goals with the marketing and all of these things. So it was a really natural fit for me. And then shortly thereafter, I decided to expand into audiobooks because I had been, many of us entrepreneurs, we can't have a hobby without turning it into a business, right? So it was one of those situations. I was voice acting as a paid hobby and took some master classes in audiobook narration, and during that process had an epiphany about why the hell aren't all of my business coaching clients, most of whom were producing books at the time, this was the rise of self-publishing, why aren't they doing audiobooks? And as a wise man once said, it sent me into an entrepreneurial seizure. I love that term. Yeah. And if you've been an entrepreneur, you understand exactly what this feels like. So it's just like a hyper-focused down the rabbit hole situation. And I ended up secret shopping about 30 audiobook producers online and found that at the time, now this is about 2014, maybe even a little earlier, no one was doing audiobooks for the self-published population or for the hybrid published population. Anything non-traditional publishing was still not being served by the audiobook companies, by the audiobook business. So everything required you to give up rights and royalties, and it just pissed me off. It just pissed me off as a
because
creator,
as a
right?
self-publisher, as it is, you're already bootstrapping and
Yeah.
shoestringing things along.
Yeah, so that was really the genesis. And since I was already working with podcasts and the audiobooks came up behind that, I decided to take a chance and start piloting audiobook services. And it took off faster than anything that I had ever done. And so I doubled down on it, and that was the seeds of Twin Flame Studios, where now, 10 years later, we've produced more than 500 audiobooks, mostly nonfiction. We produced about 3 dozen podcasts over the course of time, either in conjunction with partners or on our own, before we stopped producing podcasts and really focused on audiobooks, and now, like I said, publishing books from podcast content. But what we're really known for in the market is our innovation in what we call voice-powered publishing, where we're working heavily with the voice and publishing formats to create an experience of books that is deeply human, deeply authentic, and really effective for developing relationships with people. And so that's mostly what we're focused on. We were the first audiobook company in the world to fully remotely produce audiobooks that were author narrated.
I recently just finished my first book, and my inspiration for starting the book and doing it in the first place, we were talking a little bit before we got started, and both of us recently were at Podfest.
right.
And we missed each other when we were there. Easy to do, by the way, if you go. But when I first encountered the folks with Podfest, I encountered them here in Atlanta for VidFest. And that really lit a fire under me to get the podcast focused and going and turn it into a video podcast and put it out on YouTube and really start focusing on building the YouTube audience, which we've been doing really well with. But as I think about all of that, and a couple months into it, I started thinking, like, all of these stories that we tell, all of these interviews that I'm doing, all these people that I'm talking to, like, this is the book. This is the content. I mean, our focus with Disc Media has always been, we help managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do. And a little bit of a broad mission, but also very specific audience of people. And all of these stories that we had, we've got transcripts of everything. And I'm like, there is content here. Here are the things that we can focus on topic-wise. And so that's what I did. But now I'm looking at it and sitting here podcasting and thinking, gosh, I got the digital version, I got the print versions going through Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And so why not an audio version?
Exactly. Exactly. Why not an audio version? Particularly since you're probably more qualified than most and closer to having the right setup for it, even though podcasting and audiobook setups are a bit different. Yeah, it's really important. And our voices are thumbprints for us. I've been continuing to research the human voice, and it's a deep passion of mine to look at how humans react to the voice. What about the voice makes us human? How do we interact with each other in ways that foster deeper communication and create trust or create not trust, the opposite
Yeah.
of trust? What tends to fool people in terms of people's voices? And now with the rise of AI and voice cloning, which I have a fair amount to say about, not even being totally opposed to it, but there's a lot of things in that world that we really need to be taking into consideration individually as well as collectively.
Yeah, I am avid user of AI. I think many
Same.
people are. But one of the things that I try to get across, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm using it in the business world, is it's an augmentation, not a replacement for work. It's to enable you to be more efficient, to get further along, but it's not yet to the point where we can just fully trust it. You can't. It'll
No.
mess things up. And to that point, even when we're using it for audio, because I've done some voiceover style footage, because if you need something quick and dirty, it's real easy to do that with.
Right?
It doesn't always give that same delivery.
No. That's one of the things it doesn't do well at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even to the point where, and again, I'm active on YouTube, watch a lot of YouTube, probably watch more YouTube than I do regular television. But man, the proliferation of AI audio generated YouTube videos
Oh,
is
sure.
just like, oh, it's so terrible. Like 2 minutes, I can't even take it.
Yeah, it is a weird disconnect, and it is getting better, but it really, there's so many markers in the human voice that neurologically and psychologically we pick up on a very deep level. I mean, we don't even know the sensors that we have. And it creates that, not only the uncanny valley effect that we talk about, where it's like, is this real? Is it not real? Is it trust it? Can I not trust it? It can create tremendous unease. Feel like a very disturbing type of feeling over time. And that's one of the reasons where we are not using AI for audiobooks until it gets much, much better. I will say, like to your point about short form, I do think that there's some place for short form or accessibility, of course. And that's one of the things we can do with author narrated audiobooks is create very, very high quality voice clones, but we don't want to use them for audiobooks. Folks might want to put a widget on their website so that they have more accessibility for their blog posts, or a website reader that's read in their voice. Those types of things, because it's a reader, it's for accessibility, for portability, mobility. That makes a lot of sense to do at this stage of the game. But a really, really good voice clone, that whole like upload 2 minutes of your voice and get a voice clone, yeah, you'll get one. But that's like saying, okay, I'm going to start a podcast by sitting down at my kitchen table and talking into my computer. It's you can do it, but it's not going to be good.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things I think that I try to be a stickler for. But because when you start going down this rabbit hole of podcasting and equipment, and I've been doing this for a little while, I would say I probably first started doing it around the time that you did. And I think you talk about this actually as part of your business and coaching and helping others, is sometimes we have a really good idea, a really good, hey, here's something I could do a podcast about this. And then you get about 5 or 8 episodes in, and then you go, now what?
Exactly. I've done it myself. Where it's, oh, this was overly ambitious. I actually needed a team to pull this off. And by the
Yeah.
time I do the kind of the numbers or the feasibility study on making something work, I decide not to continue with it. But it always turns into something else. Those creative endeavors always lead
Yeah.
us to our next thing. I've been a host of a number of podcasts. I've been a guest on countless podcasts. What has really made the biggest difference currently in the last year and a half for my company, and has really kind of hit the authors we serve where they live, is hosting these monthly live events where authors, professionals can come in, and I host and facilitate a panel of experts on a certain topic related to publishing. And last year, we had more than 1,500 registrations throughout the year. And now those people are folks that are in my community. While I absolutely love podcasting, for me, having the conversion into being able to have conversations with people, to nurture them, to email them, to have conversations, I'm repeating myself, is really the most valuable thing that we have done to foster that sense of community and also create our email list.
I was chuckling there a second when you were like, I'm repeating myself. Isn't that funny how when you're doing this, you are so hypersensitive and aware of
Oh, yeah.
everything
all
that
the
comes out of
damn
your
time. Like, I can't even look at myself in the video right now because I'm like a crow. I'm like, is that shiny? Is that a thing? What is that over there? Oh, my light's too bright. Oh, my glasses are reflecting. Like, it's just, you have to let it go and trust that your audience is going to get what they need from, and hopefully not be too distracted by the lack of perfection.
But honestly, I think a little bit the lack of perfection is what I enjoy about this. It's not hyper scrubbed and polished to the point where it comes off as very produced. And nothing against those very produced things that are out there, because I think those are equally entertaining, but you really develop a sense for, sometimes I think an audience wants a sense of authenticity. I think they're willing to put up with those things that are a little less than 60 Minutes episode.
That's true. You can do the whole thing of like the tick, 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 tick,
Yeah.
profile, the whole thing.
Given the number of things that you've done in this space, if you're a business owner, you're thinking about this podcast medium, or really just even the audio medium, as a way of reaching people and connecting with them, what are some things, some maybe common pitfalls that you sometimes see that you would advise people to try and avoid?
Audio is a pretty broad spectrum. And what you'll hear in marketing right now is video. And that is really only the case if your audience wants that and they're asking for it. And then there's so many different formats that you can have something take, right? All of the social media platforms would have you believe that reels, short form video are what you 100% need to have. And we do produce them. But I will say that if anyone is focused on social media as the way that they want to grow their business, it's almost a full-time job in and of itself in this current landscape.
Yeah.
It really is. And so if you were going to, and it depends on your business, of course, but where I live in the realm of people who are deep thought, education, coaching, expertise in a really deep and wide realm, the only platform that we're finding that folks are really making traction on is Substack, because it does allow for the longer form content, which allows people to have that authenticity put forward, and for people to be able to evaluate not just the short form 30-second to 1 minute reels, but also their deeper thoughts. And you can podcast on that platform as well as share articles. And there's a couple of really interesting kind of case studies you could look at, like a show called Diabolical Lies, which was do you mind if I tell a quick story about this show?
Go right ahead, absolutely.
I'm not involved with the show at all. I'm a fan. I'm actually a member of the community. But I had followed one of the co-hosts. It's a co-hosted show, two women, Katie Getty-Tossin and Caro, damn it, I can't remember her last name. But Katie Getty-Tossin is a financial podcaster, has a huge following. Show is produced by Morning Brew. Big download numbers, big show. And Caro is a novelist who had a substantial following on TikTok, talks a lot about equality and socialism and feminism and all the isms. And the two of them became friends from very different walks of life and decided to start this show called Diabolical Lies that was going to be kind of member funded only, listener funded only. That show on Substack, launched specifically as a podcast, developed more followers in 6 months than it took than Katie's show Money with Katie had developed in 4 years.
Wow.
Even though she is a top financial podcast backed by Morning Brew, a huge company. And her newsletter, which she had already built before partnering with Morning Brew, is bigger than folks like Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman. She's brilliant. So the point is that there was a community hungry to support that type of content, which is very deep dive. They do at least 30 hours of research and preparation for every episode they do. And most of the episodes are 90 minutes to 2.5 hours long. And they only produce 2 a month. Plus, the community chat is only open to paying members of the community at $8 a month. They have made well over, they're very transparent with their money. They've given now $130,000, I think, in 2025 to charities that were chosen by the community. And they have covered their costs and each brought home about $80,000 in income each from a listener-supported podcast, because they're doing this deep work in an area that people really want to talk about, and they are safeguarding their community. So this is now the place that we're living in, where people are craving deep connection. They're craving safe places to have conversations they're interested in. And they want to be with people who are both authentic and willing to do the deep research and also be very journalistic about it as well. You know, they have opinions.
Yeah.
They're also running the gap between the two. So that's all a very longish story to say that I think that if you are using audio in this day and age, you really need to be thoughtful about what you're creating and putting out into the world, and be very targeted and very strategic about what you're doing. And you're better off creating less content better. And then focusing on creating community, not just marketing, but actual community, because that is the direction that we really need. And developing that trust right now in the space of AI, in the space of global drastic change, is humans are gathering, they need to gather together. So that's what we're looking to do.
It's a very interesting approach and a very interesting show, it sounds like. You know, one of the things that we have with this show tried to do is when we started the company, no social media, no following, no anything really, and really kind of started it on purpose that way. And we've had people reach out, and if you pay us money, we can help you be more visible and do things better. And I've purposely not taken that on, primarily because I want this to be authentic. Like, I want it to be, if you didn't know what the hell you were doing, us being the case in point there, and you were trying to start something from nothing, how easy or difficult can it be? And the reality is that you could maybe get lucky and do something that goes viral and get you some attention. But the reality is that, and it's funny because I actually teach a class in social media marketing. We just kicked off this semester, and the very first week I had a discussion, and I told everybody, I'm like, social media isn't something you just dabble in.
No,
it's not something that you like, I'm going to post a couple times a week and then we'll just see how it goes. And then maybe if I do it well enough, or I do something creative enough, it'll hit and I'll be popular. It's not that. You got to do it every day. You got to look at your numbers every day. You got to obsess about language and imagery and reach and audience and, who you're trying to capture. and constantly looking at other people's stuff and going, how come that has this many views or engagements? Or it's so hard to figure out the algorithms, because when you think you have it right, because we have a print publication, or not print publication, an online publication as well. And a couple things that we had, we were humming there for a little while.
Oh, yeah?
And it's when Google was tweaking their algorithm and they were looking for AI content, and we just happened to hit a little bump and we got a little bit of a ride out of it. And then it just died.
I've heard that story more times than I can count. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but part of the reason that we do this is to, kind of share the fact that really is a practice around this. It's just not something that you dabble in. And I don't say that because I don't want people to be adventurous and get into it. I just setting the right expectation that, like, don't expect to do 2 or 3 posts a week and think that it's going to do something, because outside of your family and friends, it's hard to get the traction.
That's true. And even if you do have traction, and I'll be really transparent about this, like we have 300,000 social media followers. Guess how much business I've generated from 300,000 social media followers in the last 10 years?
At a probably 2 to 3% click-through rate?
None. I'll just answer you. None. None.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
none.
Crazy.
Isn't that wild? And we're talking about regular posting and engagement and all of these kinds of things. And here's the thing. It's not about us generating business. We have chosen to instead, because we know audiobooks are extremely niche, and who we work with is pretty niche, right?
Yeah.
So it's not for us. What we ended up deciding was it's not about us generating business from the social media. It's just about sharing the brand and also sharing the audiobooks that we're creating on behalf of our authors. We don't get any royalties from our authors, but we want to stand behind their work. So we've basically used social media as reputation,
with them, right?
Yeah, we've basically used it for reputation. And how we generate business is truly through pretty deep relationships and developing community. And so you can do business so many different ways. You don't have to do everything. You only really need to do a couple things well.
It's funny that you say that, because that is one of the things that I think, as we've gotten into this year, going into our 3rd year of doing this, and the first year was very much build a website, learn SEO,
Now
figure
it's all
out,
changed, yes.
yeah, figure out how to just get content out there, see what we create, backlinks, all of that kind of wonderful stuff. Tweak the website so it's responsive and it's quick and all of that. Newsletters, we've done that a little bit. We've got really good open rates on our newsletter, but it's still what we lacked. And it's funny, what we lacked really was a product. We had all kinds of content we're putting out there, but we didn't really have product. And getting more into publishing, like physical publishing, things that people can learn from, but also the community aspect of it. Yeah. We're reaching out to a very kind of specific target group of people: managers, leaders, entrepreneurs, basically the 25 to 55. Actually, it's not even that. I would say it's more like 35 to 55 demographic. People who are in own business, getting ready to transition to a different chapter in their life, or working their way up into senior leadership positions.
Sure.
That is our audience base. And now it's about trying to provide information, content, build a community around all of these people who I think are trying to figure out this space a little bit more, not just podcasting, but YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. It's like, how do we leverage that to grow what we do? And it's a lot. It's a lot of combing through data and reading and talking to people and sharing tips and ideas and seeing what works. Crazy amount of things that you have to engage in to try and grow that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so now I'm tired now, Ben. Okay.
I know, talking about all the work. Well, let me ask you this, because with your company that you have now, you've kind of fallen into this niche of working with audiobooks for, I was going to say freelance, I know that's not the right word, for independent publishing. how is the business going? How, if you are in that space, because realistically, like I said, just put out a book and thinking, yeah, I'll be honest with you. The reason I'm like a little hesitant on doing the audiobook
Sure.
is it's a lot of hours behind a
It
microphone and a
is.
lot of editing.
It sure is.
I just don't know if I want to put myself through that. So if you're like me and you're not sure, how do you engage with the work that you're doing, and then what does that process look like for people?
So are you asking kind of how do we generate business?
Yes, but also if you are a person who has put out a book and is maybe thinking about moving it into an audiobook format,
Right.
I imagine that's something you guys do as well.
Well, so we produce all kinds of audiobooks. We
Okay.
have a deep specialty in the author narration, but we literally can produce fiction, nonfiction, multi-voice, full cast. You want something innovative with music insertions and things like that. I mean, our record for number of voices on a book is 36.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all produced remotely and seamlessly. So it's it's a really interesting world to be in. So a couple of things just about the audiobook specific industry and then about the publishing industry, because I would love to touch on the whole podcast content to publishing pipeline as
Yeah.
well, because that's been really fascinating as a line of business to develop in the last just a year and a half or so. So with audiobooks have had significant growth every year for 15 years running. And they have been the fastest growing part of the publishing industry for more than 15 years. And a lot of people don't realize that. It is, and the weird thing is it's hit a tipping point where like audiobooks in North America, I believe just in the US, generated over $2 billion in 2024. The 2025 numbers aren't out yet. But there was significant predictions that in 2025 we were going to see a doubling of that market, which that's a big hockey stick kind of growth moment where things go from steady growth, steady growth, steady growth to whew, crazy pants. And it's not just in the US, it is worldwide. And it is largely attributed, first of all, to the accessibility of audio, that you can listen when you can't read. You can listen when you can't watch. And it is so familiar, and it's a lot easier for folks who don't even have necessarily smartphones to find ways to listen, because it is much data lighter. That's not even a grammatical sentence right there. It is much more data light than it is for video.
Yeah.
So it's a really fascinating world. And so people who listen to audiobooks listen to more books than people who read tend to read. People consume audiobooks like popcorn.
Can I
It's a
tell you,
huge
like
market.
years ago, when Audible first came out,
Oh yeah.
many, many years ago. And as a matter of fact, when they first came out, they would give away free digital audio players. It was called an Otis. I have one somewhere in the house.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I still have it, and you could download the book off your computer into your little audio thing, and I would listen to it at work, or in my car, right? Because I have the little cassette tape adapter you'd put into your cassette. They're aging myself now, but I've been big into audiobooks and even podcasting for so long. So like
Yeah.
this history that you're talking about and seeing where it has come. And yeah, I used to tell people I listen to more books than I read, primarily because a lot of times I was commuting.
That's
I'd
right.
spend going to work an hour each way or more. You get through a big book. I mean, I got through Atlas Shrugged on
Oh, I'm
audio,
so sorry. Yeah.
which is 28 hours long.
It's wild. Yeah, I mean, and in the nonfiction space, I like to use examples like the kind of classic pre-social media influencers like Tony Robbins or Zig Ziglar, when they were producing books on tape back
Yep.
in the day.
Yep.
They were 22-hour, 20-hour books.
Yeah, you'd buy a big portfolio
A
of
huge
cassette
portfolio
tapes.
of them. Those programs outsold the books by a magnitude
Yeah.
because of the portability and because there's this sense of them being with you. being mentored by them. And even though a lot of times, like Tony's work, he would narrate the beginning and narrate the end and have a professional narrator who had sounded nothing like him produce the middle. And so it's really interesting how durable audio is, but it often just lies underneath the radar because it's so ubiquitous. And we don't almost even notice it because podcasts are free. And you can get audiobooks out of libraries and books out of libraries, and books or podcasts and audiobooks in the great scheme of things are relatively low cost compared to taking an online course or hiring a coach or anything else. So it's just part of the fabric of our society that we often take for granted. But when you tease out these portions and you actually look at the data and the numbers, we find particularly with audiobooks that not only is the market set to double, but there's also a complete lack of interest in AI audiobooks.
So I don't know why I didn't think of this question earlier, but it just struck me as you were saying that the audience is going to double. Spotify now offers audiobooks as part of their subscription program.
Yeah.
I believe YouTube Music does as well. Apple, like everybody is getting into the audiobook, and not every audiobook.
It's been a slow burn. Yeah.
Yeah, it has. But
yeah.
Interestingly, the music industry, all audio and all the streaming platforms are really heavily embracing that. And they're now starting to come around to audiobooks. When you all are producing your content and the books, what are your distribution streams for getting that content out there? Or do you help me understand that a little bit?
We absolutely do distribution on our authors' behalf. So we do complete production. We do all the advisements. Because we don't take any rights or royalties, we're acting as advocates for our authors and making sure that they have the information to make good choices. We help them make strategic choices. Everything from, do you narrate it yourself? Do you work with a professional narrator? Do you do a hybrid of the two? And where do you want it distributed? So, and that has a lot to do with royalty rates. So you can get your audiobook on up to 40 different platforms as a self-published, hybrid published, non-traditionally published author. And we do work with publishers as well, non-traditional publishers, as their audiobook division. And so we have the capability and scalability to do that. We produce about 100 audiobooks a year, and that's no mean feat. So in terms of distribution, we usually handle the distribution on behalf of our authors. They don't have to handle that technical piece, and we're standing behind our work in terms of its quality and making sure that it gets through the quality control processes, which are quite rigorous. But what's interesting is that, we have the gift and the problem of Amazon, who owns Audible. And that they basically are responsible right now for over 60% of book and audiobook sales on the planet.
Yeah.
If not more. And so it's a real challenge to not work with Audible at this point, because as of today, there's been no real viable competitor. And so this is part of the strategy we have to kind of get into if you are vehemently opposed to Audible, and understandable. I get that. What are your other options? And there are other options to that. Spotify has its own issues. They've had issues with creator contracts multiple times. I personally, as a creator myself, have a real hard time with that. And their market share is actually pretty minimal. So there's all of these strategic things you have to take into consideration. But once you have the product of the audiobook, being able to distribute it in full, and then also being able to use it as a body of work to slice and dice potentially into courses, different materials, blog posts, things like that, different audio pieces. I've seen people create limited series podcasts from their audiobook. Brene Brown, with her latest book, Strong Ground, in her series about the book, used excerpts from the audiobook in the podcast at length, which I thought was really interesting to see such a well-known author and person of great influence do that. But it was nice to see and hear, for that matter, as well. Yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration, But we're living in a time where you really can't ignore audio if you are producing a book. And if you are producing a podcast that is designed to build a platform, build something enduring, and showcase your expertise and the expertise of others, you also can't ignore having a book, which is why we now have the podcast content to book transformation that we're working with, because podcasts are a body of work.
Yeah, they are. As as you know, so many people are starting to discover that as you do a podcast, you're putting your own thoughts and wisdom and insight out there. And, these are conversations that you probably have with colleagues of your own, with customers of your own. And that's a good way of turning your own words into something that is more tangible for a broader audience. And when we with Dist Media thought about we've been working on this website, it does okay. We got to about 1,000 uniques a month, and that's all right. But when you've got other media websites out there that are putting out content, multiple pieces of content an hour, they're just going to eclipse anything that you're trying to do. So we settled back into our old comfy space around podcasting, and then just tweaked it with video now. One of the things I was thinking about, though, getting back on that, the audio space and where you distribute, how you distribute, because certainly you could go through the process of recording something yourself and editing it, and just knowing the practice of that. It's no small feat. And then even when you're done recording,
don't recommend.
I was going to say, even when you're done recording, like if you talk to somebody who's a sound engineer, boy, they will pick apart your stuff in a heartbeat.
Oh, in a heartbeat. It is not like recording a podcast. You can get away with so much in podcasting. You cannot get away with in audiobooks, not even close. It is super, super picky.
Yeah.
And you can't always fix it in post either, so to speak.
Right. And, there are things when you are producing an audiobook that, you hinted at this a little bit ago when you were talking about the characteristics that people listen for in audio. Mm-hmm. The tone, the cadence, and there are certain things that are going to help to push a point. And a good engineer, a good producer is going to hear that and know how to pull that out of the scent. Like the way they're hearing it is way different than the person who's speaking the words hears it.
So true. 100% true.
And so, once you get past all of that, then you still the distribution side, right? So you can't just make it an MP3 and put it out there, because it's not, you don't have, what is that, the DMCA, with the Digital Music Copyright Act, which
there's all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you want to distribute it on these different platforms, there is a massive checklist of how you have to record, the bit rate, the megahertz, the noise floor, the space at the beginning and end of chapters, all of that is very, very specific. Room noise, all kinds of stuff.
So let's say, for example, somebody's hearing this and they're like, I'm going to reach out to Twin Flames because I want my book on audio and I want to do that.
Sure.
Do you all have a vetting process where you look at the content, you read through it, and you go, this probably isn't for us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, because we are not a traditional publisher, we don't have acquisition editors who are saying this fits with our brand, this doesn't fit with our brand. So we have the ability to work with a wide range of authors. That being said, if something is really poor quality, we will strongly suggest they do not invest in audio. We'll just be really kind about it. We're not going to take somebody's money if we don't think it's going to turn into a good product.
Yeah, makes sense.
Same way with the conversation around whether an author narrates themselves versus does a hybrid, and a professional in different parts of the book, or fully professionally narrated. We have a whole series of questions that over the course of 500 audiobooks we've developed to check and see if it makes sense for that person to narrate their own book or not. And the truth is that what sells audiobooks is the quality of the narration. It's not whether the author narrates it or not. In
Yeah.
fact, the vast majority of audiobooks in the past have been narrated by professional narrators. Now we have the ability to have our authors narrate their own books, but there's also factors where that would be good for them and it might not be good for them. And so we work through that with our authors. And that's also why, from a pricing standpoint, we keep our pricing pretty much the same, whether you are working with a narrator or doing it yourself. When I say doing it yourself, I mean working with our team to
Yeah,
actually do
because
the full
the
direction
work,
and sound engineering. And it's actually
I
more
was going
work
to say
to
the
work
work and
with
the
an,
labor,
yeah, it's much
not to
more
say
work.
that it isn't reading the
Yeah.
book, but it's a lot of the post-production.
Yeah, and the performance, what we find is that we get files all the time. People saying, well, can you just do the distribution? Or can you, I'm having a problem. Now I had my audiobook produced by, a lot of times it's a podcast producer. Sorry, it is. Or even I went and recorded at a local studio. Well, did the local studio specialize in audiobooks? Well, no. 100% of the time, there's something wrong with the files. I can count on one hand the number of times that we have received files from somebody that there wasn't something wrong with it that needed to be fixed or was not going to be able to be published on the audiobook platforms. That's really how detailed things are. So we have to go through our own due diligence with the author, and our setups are very simple, but it's because we know how to put things together to make it easy for the author and have the right setup so that when we're directing and doing that sound engineering, they're getting what we need out of the performance and coaching them as we go.
So when you go down this path as a as somebody who's interested in it, and you know what, I think I don't know that I want to ask that question. I was going to ask, like, what is the investment from the author in this, and I imagine that it varies.
It varies, but there's a range. We typically are in anywhere from 3 to 5K, and I have no problem talking about that because I think you should know where you are in the market, and we're considered extremely mid-market. There are lots of audiobook companies who are going to charge way more than that. If DIY or you go to an independent producer or something like that, you might pay less than that. It really is totally up to the type of experience you want to have. It's like that old saying, you can have things, what is it, fast, cheap, or good, pick two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
To this day, I still use that a lot. No, that's very true, and I appreciate you sharing that because
Yeah.
my initial instinct was it depends maybe on the book length. It depends on the amount of production that's going to go into it, and I'm sure those are variables. But that's a pretty good understanding of range. So
Yeah.
when so let me ask you this: what are some things that you're doing today with Twin Flames? Are you branching out into anything new or upcoming that is particularly interesting for you in the near future?
Well, we're always looking for innovation on the audiobook side. And at the same time, we did this pilot with what we call Podcraft Books in the last year and produced our first 5 books from podcast content. And this has been a really fascinating collaboration between podcast hosts working with us and working with our team, professional ghostwriter, professional, developmental editors, and our publishing team to truly draw in their podcast content as a body of work, analyze it as a body of work in a whole, not just individual episodes and writing like episode to chapter. No, 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 no. Actually analyzing the entire body of work, pulling out what we call the corpus, the themes, the strengths, like the things that we can build upon, and also analyzing the host's voice. How does the host speak? What are their vocal patterns? How do they communicate beliefs? How do they communicate problem solving? And pulling that out all into what we call a voice print, and then creating these really amazing book briefs that kind of map out in conjunction with a podcast host goals, the type of book they want to create and what's possible from the podcast. And then we're able to have our team of developmental editors and ghostwriters work with the podcast content to create absolutely extraordinary books. And this is one of the reasons I was at Podfest, where you and I missed each other, because I had 3 of our authors there to be on a panel to talk about their experience of creating books from their podcast with us and what that's now making available to them. Because it is a tragedy that when somebody spends so much time and energy and effort on their podcast, that they aren't given the same regard and cachet that a published author is. And so to actually be able to draw upon that body of work and say, have this enduring consumable format where a book can bring you listeners and listeners can buy your book, it helps to really create more of an ecosystem that so many podcast hosts want to have. And this is a nice path to be able to do it, because who the hell has the time to write a book? It really, I've seen over 500 audiobooks, and I run an organization for professionals in the publishing space. It's 180 people. My God, it takes hundreds of hours to write a book. And yes, you can absolutely do it. But if you've already got a body of work, why don't we just freaking use it?
Yeah, I think it's so very true, and that's kind of one of the things that we did here when I always talk about me as if I'm more than one person. It's kind of what I did in tapping into the book that I put together, because there's a lot of really good topics that I get into that I don't always have the opportunity to write about. Or maybe there's just a little bit out of one conversation. But when you start stringing them all together and you start looking at like the broader body of work, and you're like, oh, and one of the things that I just happen to be a person that I am is I'm always one of those people who likes to make connections across a lot of broad things that are related. So what I try to do is pull out, like, how does this complement that and can connect with this other thing? And so that's ultimately what I try to do with the book that I did. And then also, because I'm a college professor and have been for 20 years, and I'm always reading research, and I'm always reading different papers and things that are out there, and just recalling my own research when I worked on my own dissertation. And so, like, the book is research. Like, I use integrated both podcast content with academic content.
That's beautiful.
And drew from my own experiences and stuff. To your point, yeah, I think if I went back and had to start it from scratch, it would probably have taken me a lot longer. Being able to draw inspiration from conversations I had, man, it still took me a while. I hate to say this, but I went better than I thought it would go, to the point where I've already, I know what I want to do for book 2. But
that's great.
And it took me probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years to get to the first one, because I had things rolling around in my head. I was like, I could do this, I could do that, and then finally just got a burr and did it.
I do think that the initial strategy and kind of the spine and what we call the book brief is the hardest part, because it's determining what book do you want to write.
Yeah.
Right? It's once you actually have that structure, you have something to work with. You're not dealing with what I call the tyranny of the blank page. And regardless of how you get there, that is the most crucial thing in book writing. And that's just not me saying that. I mean, that's one of the things that comes up between me and my colleagues in the publishing industry all the time.
And I will say this, and man, I always put stuff out there. I don't know. I think a lot of people might be similar this way. You put things out there and then you pick it apart and you're like, I could have done this better and that better.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
As I look at it and reflect on everything, now that I've finally packaged it and just kind of, you do have to get to a point where you just put it away and call it done and then move forward. But now as I'm looking back on it, so the book is 10 topics to help managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do. The topics themselves, I'm like, I could have done a better job of putting them in a better flow, or creating an overarching theme across them all. But lessons learned, like the next one will be better.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. We always learn. And if I always tell people, if you do nothing else when you're writing a book, it's to hire a really great developmental editor. Because no matter how good your own writing is, these folks have such a beautiful ability and expertise to do exactly what you said, to take your work and to shape it into something that is even more glorious through the way the content flows and how the order of things and the arc of just what you said. So, yeah, if you do nothing else in book writing, that would be the one thing that I would say is 100% necessary. That and making sure you have a professional cover. That's the other thing that really screws people over.
So how do you like my cover?
Pretty good. That looks nice. I dig it.
Yeah, this is the thing that has just recently been done. And one of the other things too, and this is why, folks, this is why I think this particular episode is good fun. So Tina approaches this from a very professional, polished, and I say that in comparison to me, okay? So a polished background of developing for others and helping others bring their voice to market. And we are doing it in a very rogue guerrilla warfare kind of a way that is all about bootstrapping, and let's see how far we can go on our own with as little upfront money as possible and see what we can make of it. And I like this contrast of things because 100% believe that if you have the resources and the ability and the capability, go partner with somebody who can really help you. You will accelerate your brand so much faster than the way we're doing it. And the way we're doing it is we are doing it in a way that is saying, if you've got an idea, it can be done. It can be done. It may not look 100% great like everybody else's stuff. It can be done. And that's the approach and the path that we're taking, is a very lower tech way of getting it done. But
no, it's totally valid. Speaking as somebody who bootstrapped all my businesses originally, I'm with you, brother. I totally get it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, though, it's about giving people the inspiration to let them know. Don't let some of these things get in your head, talk you out of doing something that is in you and is a burning fire in you. I think find a way. If you're really interested, you will find a way. Tina, I know we've gone a little bit over here, and I apologize about that. I was trying to be mindful of people's time. If people are looking to reach out to you, to get in touch with your organization, the things that you're doing, where do they find you?
You can find us at Twin Flames Studios, that's plural.com. And you can also look me up, Tina Dietz, Dietz, on Google, and I show up as the first result on Google. Still, AI has not taken over. So those two things, reach out through our website. We've got free events every month for authors and aspiring authors to get expert advice. We've got a wonderful directory of resources for authors and aspiring authors on our website. And you can also listen to some of our audiobooks and hear from folks who have worked with us before. It's a lovely ecosystem that we continue to develop, and anybody who's looking to have their voice out in the world more, we're looking to cultivate and foster those voices.
That is so awesome. Well, thank you so much for you do. I'm glad that we finally got a chance to connect, even though we missed each other at PodFest. But thank you so much for your knowledge and your wisdom. Some really good information you shared, and I really appreciate that. For everybody else, thank you guys for checking out Dist Media, A Startup Story. And as I always say, like, share with friends, share with enemies. We don't care. As long as you share it with somebody, we'll love it. If you guys are interested in my book, please check out 10 topics for managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs to get better at what you do. You can find that at the Daily Pitch shop, which is shop.dailypitch.news, or on Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks very much for dropping in, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening to Disc Media, A Startup Story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of Disc Media Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@discmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes or information about our guests by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.